In this episode, we dive into gut-wrenching shark attacks, from a man slipping off a boat falling into the mouth of a hungry bull shark to a Navy SEAL exercise turned deadly after being mistaken as a sea lion by a massive shark. But first, let's start with our first story, where a diver gets devoured by a female great white. The morning of November 15, 2017, dawned with perfect conditions along California's rugged coastline. A gentle offshore breeze created glassy water conditions at Año Nuevo State Park, while the early morning sun painted golden streaks across the Pacific. For most people, 7:30 a.m. would be too early for a swim, but for Rebecca Chen, a 26-year-old marathon swimmer and marine biology graduate student, dawn represented the perfect training window. Rebecca embodied dedication in its purest form. Pursuing her master's degree in marine biology at UC Santa Barbara, she had already completed several grueling long-distance swims, each one meticulously planned with safety protocols that had become legendary among her fellow swimmers. Her friends described her as methodical to a fault, the type of person who would spend hours researching weather patterns and ocean conditions before entering the water. She was training for the Catalina Channel crossing, a 20-mile odyssey that would test every ounce of her endurance and skill. On this particular morning, Rebecca was following her usual protocol with her safety kayaker, Maria, positioned 50 yards offshore to monitor her progress. The area was experiencing peak elephant seal pupping season, with hundreds of seals and their pups creating the feeding opportunities that had attracted several great whites to the region. Rebecca's black wetsuit and steady rhythmic swimming stroke, while following all safety guidelines, still closely resembled the movement pattern of a seal, a case of mistaken identity that even the most careful swimmers couldn't completely avoid. What Rebecca knew from her marine biology studies was that great white sharks are most active during dawn and dusk, using the low light conditions to their advantage when hunting. These apex predators can detect the slightest vibrations and electrical impulses from remarkable distances, and their powerful jaws can generate devastating bite forces. During elephant seal pupping season, great whites patrol these waters with heightened activity, their prehistoric instincts finely tuned to detect any movement that resembles their preferred prey. Rebecca had been swimming for 45 minutes, staying within the designated safety corridor 200 yards from shore with her kayaker maintaining visual contact, when a massive shadow appeared beneath her. A 14-foot female great white shark had been actively hunting the abundant seal population in the area. The attack came from below with devastating force, the shark's massive jaws clamping down on Rebecca's torso in a classic ambush strike. The great white's initial strike was so powerful it lifted Rebecca partially out of the water before releasing her back to the surface. The shark's serrated teeth had torn through Rebecca's wetsuit and into her ribcage, creating deep lacerations that severed major blood vessels. She fought desperately to stay afloat, her marathon swimmer's strength allowing her to break the surface and call for help, but massive blood loss was already taking its toll. Maria immediately paddled toward her, activating her emergency radio beacon while trying to reach Rebecca. The great white had disappeared after the single investigative bite, likely determining that Rebecca wasn't its preferred prey, but the damage was already fatal. Rebecca's final moments were spent struggling against the inevitable as shock set in and her body began to shut down. The cold Pacific water that had been her training partner for years now became her enemy as blood poured from the massive puncture wounds. Coast Guard helicopters arrived 18 minutes after Maria's emergency call, their crews working with the kayaker to pull Rebecca from the water. Despite immediate medical attention and a desperate race to the trauma center, she had sustained injuries that proved fatal. Massive blood loss from deep puncture wounds that had damaged vital organs and crushed several ribs. But while the waters off California claimed one life in their deadly embrace, the Gulf of Mexico was about to prove that sharks don't discriminate between recreational swimmers and experienced mariners. Sometimes the ocean's most dangerous predators strike when you least expect them, turning a routine workday into a fight for survival. September 3rd, 2014 brought ideal fishing conditions to the Gulf of Mexico. 25 miles southeast of Galveston, Texas, the morning sun sparkled off calm waters, while a gentle breeze kept temperatures comfortable for the charter boat crew and their eager clients. For Tommy Rodriguez, a 31-year-old first mate with 7 years of experience working these waters, it was shaping up to be another successful day on the Gulf. Tommy was the kind of crew member every charter captain dreamed of having. Reliable, experienced, and genuinely passionate about helping clients land their dream catch, he had built a reputation as one of the most skilled first mates in the Galveston fleet. His wife and 2 young children were the center of his world, and his steady income from charter work provided them with a comfortable life. Clients often requested him specifically, knowing that Tommy's expertise could make the difference between a good fishing trip and an unforgettable one. The day had been exceptionally productive. The crew had been chumming heavily since dawn, creating a slick of fish blood and bait that attracted red snapper from the depths below. By 3:20 p.m., they had already filled several coolers with impressive catches, and the clients were thrilled with their success. Tommy was in his element, moving efficiently around the boat, helping clients fight large fish while maintaining the safety protocols that had kept him injury-free throughout his career. What Tommy Tommy and the crew didn't realize was that their chumming operation, while following standard practices, had attracted more than just red snapper. The blood-rich waters they had created were drawing the attention of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators. Bull sharks, unlike their more famous great white cousins, are perfectly adapted for these exact conditions. They can tolerate both salt and fresh water, allowing them to hunt in murky coastal areas where other sharks can't survive. These powerful predators can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with aggressive territorial behavior that makes them investigate any unusual activity in their domain. The accident happened despite all safety precautions. Tommy was helping a client fight a massive 40-pound red snapper, properly harnessed and following protocol, when an unexpected equipment failure occurred. The safety harness clip, weakened by months of saltwater exposure, snapped under the strain as the boat lurched in heavy swells. Despite his years of experience and sure footing, Tommy lost his balance and fell backward into the Gulf waters, a freak accident that could have happened to anyone. A 9-foot bull shark had been circling beneath the boat, attracted by the chum slick and the vibrations of struggling fish. The moment Tommy hit the water, the shark's predatory instincts took over. Bull sharks are notorious for their lightning-fast attacks in murky water, and this one struck within seconds of Tommy entering the Gulf. The crew immediately threw life rings and started the engine, following emergency protocols, but they were fighting against one of nature's most efficient killing machines. The bull shark's attack was swift and brutal. The predator clamped down on Tommy's right leg just above the knee, its powerful jaws designed for crushing bone. Tommy's screams echoed across the water as the shark released and immediately struck again, this time targeting his torso with violent head-shaking motions that tore through flesh and muscle. The crew watched in horror as the water around Tommy turned crimson, each successive bite creating deeper wounds and more devastating injuries. Tommy fought with everything he had, following his water survival training by striking at the shark's snout and trying to protect his vital organs. But bull sharks are built like underwater tanks, compact, muscular, and virtually unstoppable once they've committed to an attack. The shark continued its relentless assault, striking repeatedly at Tommy's legs and torso, its powerful jaws crushing bone and tearing through muscle with each devastating bite. Despite heroic rescue attempts with boat hooks and life preservers, and despite reaching him within 3 agonizing minutes, Tommy sustained massive injuries that no human body could survive. The bull shark's powerful jaws had caused catastrophic damage, severing major arteries and crushing vital organs. Tommy died from massive blood loss and trauma during the desperate race back to shore, his final words a whispered message for his wife and children. The tragedy led to improved safety harness inspection protocols and backup safety systems across the Gulf charter fleet. But for Tommy's family, no safety measure could bring back the husband and father they had lost. Yet as devastating as this daylight attack had been, the ocean's deadliest predators often prefer to hunt under the cover of darkness, where even the most experienced marine professionals can find themselves face to face with prehistoric killing machines. April 28, 2015 brought perfect conditions for night diving off Jupiter, Florida. The water was unusually clear for the season, with visibility extending nearly 60 feet in all directions, while gentle currents promised ideal conditions for underwater photography. For Dr. Amanda Foster, a 33-year-old marine photographer and research scientist, these conditions represented a rare opportunity to document shark behavior during their most active hunting period. Amanda was the epitome of a dedicated marine researcher. With over 150 shark dives under her belt, she had built a reputation for capturing stunning images that bridged the gap between scientific documentation and public education. Her work had been published in numerous research journals, and she was currently leading a groundbreaking study on tiger shark feeding patterns for a prestigious marine biology institute. Colleagues described her as fearless, but never reckless, someone who understood the risks of her work, but was driven by an insatiable curiosity about the ocean's apex predators. Her research partner for this dive was equally experienced, and together they had planned a methodical documentation session in waters known for regular tiger shark activity. The dive was part of a larger study examining how these massive predators adapted their hunting strategies in different environments. Amanda's underwater photography equipment was state-of-the-art, designed specifically for low-light conditions and capable of capturing the subtle behavioral cues that made her research so valuable to the scientific community. At 8:45 p.m., Amanda and James descended into the dark waters, their powerful dive lights cutting through the blackness as they searched for their subjects. They maintained proper buddy protocol, staying within 15 feet of each other as they documented the nighttime reef activity. Everything was proceeding according to plan when an unexpected strong current began to separate the dive team. Despite their best efforts to stay together, the current was stronger than forecasted, and within minutes Amanda found herself 25 feet from James, still within acceptable range but at the edge of their safety protocols. Through her viewfinder, Amanda spotted a magnificent 11-foot tiger shark displaying feeding behavior near a coral outcropping. Following research protocol, she signaled James and began documenting the encounter from what should have been a safe distance. Amanda knew from her extensive research that tiger sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of growing up to 18 feet long and weighing over 1,400 pounds. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are active hunters at night, using their exceptional senses to locate prey in complete darkness. Their jaws are incredibly versatile, powerful enough to crush sea turtle shells and equipped with uniquely serrated teeth designed to saw through virtually any material, from bone to metal. What makes them particularly dangerous is their curiosity about unusual objects and movements, earning them a reputation as one of the ocean's most unpredictable predators. The shark was exhibiting normal investigative behavior, the distinctive movements that indicated it was hunting in the area. Amanda maintained proper distance and followed all safety protocols, but tiger sharks are known for their curiosity about unusual objects and lights. The attack came without warning as Amanda was photographing the shark's natural behavior from what should have been a safe distance. The massive tiger shark, likely attracted by the unusual lights and movements, approached with calculated precision. The first contact was investigative. The shark bumped Amanda's camera housing with its snout, a common behavior when these predators encounter unfamiliar objects. Amanda followed protocol, remaining calm and avoiding sudden movements, but the shark's investigation escalated quickly. The tiger shark's bite was swift and decisive. The massive jaws clamped down on Amanda's shoulder and upper arm. The shark's uniquely designed teeth, curved and serrated like saw blades, penetrating through her wetsuit and into tissue. The bite lasted only seconds before the shark released her, but the damage was severe. Amanda's buoyancy control device was punctured, and she had sustained deep lacerations that were bleeding heavily into the surrounding water. James immediately responded to Amanda's distress signals, reaching her within seconds and initiating emergency ascent procedures. But the tiger shark, having tasted blood, showed renewed interest in the area. As James helped Amanda toward the surface, the predator approached again, this time making contact with Amanda's legs as she struggled to ascend. The second encounter was brief, but devastating, the shark's powerful jaws creating additional wounds before backing away. Amanda's dive computer emergency ascent alarm activated, and James managed to get her to the surface while using his dive light to deter the shark. The surface support boat, monitoring their dive profiles, immediately responded to the emergency signals. They reached Amanda within 12 minutes of the initial attack, but she had sustained massive blood loss from multiple wounds. The tiger shark had disappeared into the depths, likely having determined that Amanda was not its preferred prey, but the damage was done. Despite immediate medical attention and a helicopter evacuation, Amanda succumbed to her injuries during transport to the trauma center, her body unable to recover from the massive blood loss and trauma inflicted by one of the ocean's most powerful predators. The incident led to enhanced safety protocols for night shark research, including mandatory tethering systems and improved emergency response procedures. Amanda's death was a tragic reminder that even when following proper protocols, researchers working with apex predators face inherent risks that can't be completely eliminated. But as tragic as Amanda's death was in the pursuit of scientific knowledge, sometimes even the most elite military training can't prepare someone for an encounter with nature's perfect killing machine. November 12, 2013 dawned crisp and clear off the northern California coast. 15 miles west of the Farallon Islands, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface broken only by the occasional whitecap as moderate swells rolled in from the northwest. For Petty Officer First Class David Park, a 29-year-old Navy SEAL, these were standard conditions for an advanced maritime training exercise that would test every skill he had developed over 8 years of military diving. David embodied everything the Navy SEALs represented. With multiple combat deployments under his belt and hundreds of military training dives completed, he was considered one of the most reliable operators in his unit. His teammates described him as methodical and unflappable, the kind of person who could maintain focus under the most extreme pressure. He had survived firefights in hostile territory and completed missions that would break lesser men, but the ocean was about to present him with a challenge that no amount of military training could prepare him for. The training exercise was designed to simulate real-world maritime interdiction scenarios, with teams of SEALs conducting underwater navigation exercises before surfacing at predetermined coordinates. David was using a closed-circuit rebreather, advanced equipment that allowed for extended underwater operations without creating telltale bubble trails. Everything was proceeding according to plan until 2:15 p.m., when his rebreather began malfunctioning at a depth depth of 60 feet. Military protocol for rebreather malfunctions was clear and non-negotiable. Immediate emergency ascent to the surface. David followed his training perfectly, ascending rapidly while monitoring his equipment for any signs of carbon dioxide poisoning. What he couldn't have known was that his emergency ascent would bring him to the surface in an area where harbor seals were actively feeding on a massive bait ball, creating exactly the kind of chaotic surface activity that attracts the ocean's apex predator. David surfaced 150 yards from his pickup point, his emergency beacon automatically activating to alert his dive team. Following protocol, he remained calm and began swimming toward the support vessel while monitoring his surroundings. The water around him was alive with feeding activity, but David's training had prepared him for wildlife encounters. What he couldn't have anticipated was that a 14-foot great white shark had been hunting the abundant seal population and was already in full predatory mode. From his military briefings, David knew that great white sharks are the ocean's most efficient hunters, with sensory systems so advanced they can detect the slightest electrical impulses and vibrations from considerable distances. During feeding events, these apex predators enter a heightened state of aggression, their prehistoric brains focused entirely on capitalizing on the abundant prey. A mature great white can accelerate rapidly through the water, launching their massive bodies with tremendous force when attacking from below. The great white had been tracking the feeding activity when David's emergency ascent brought him directly into the predator's hunting zone. To the shark's primitive brain, David's black wetsuit and surface movements were indistinguishable from a seal. The attack came from directly below with explosive force. The massive shark breached the surface partially, its jaws clamping down on David's torso with devastating power. The great white's attack was a textbook example of their hunting prowess, a vertical strike from the depths with such force that both David and the shark were launched several feet above the water's surface. David's SEAL training kicked in immediately as he found himself in the jaws of a massive predator. He struck at the shark's eyes and gills with precision strikes taught in close quarters combat, but he was fighting against millions of years of evolutionary perfection. The shark's initial bite had crushed several of his ribs and punctured his lung, but David's military conditioning kept him conscious and fighting. The great white, following its typical hunting pattern, released David after the initial bite and circled back to assess its prey, but the damage from that single bite was catastrophic. David's diving equipment had been no match for teeth that had evolved to tear through blubber and bone. Blood poured from massive puncture wounds as David struggled to stay afloat and activate his emergency signaling devices. David's support team had been monitoring his dive profile and immediately responded when his emergency beacon activated. The support vessel was already racing toward his location at full speed when the attack occurred. David's final act was to activate his emergency strobe light, the bright signal cutting through the afternoon sky even as blood loss began to take its toll. The great white, having determined that David was not its preferred prey, disappeared back into the depths after the single investigative bite, but the damage was done. The crew reached him within 8 minutes, an incredibly fast response time that would have saved most people in most situations. They found David conscious but in severe distress, his body bearing the unmistakable wounds of a great white attack, massive puncture wounds from the initial bite that had crushed his chest cavity and damaged vital organs. The team immediately initiated trauma protocols, with Navy corpsmen trained in battlefield medicine working to stabilize him during the desperate race back to shore. Despite their expertise and immediate medical attention, David had sustained injuries that proved fatal. The great white's single bite had caused massive internal bleeding, punctured his lung, and damaged his heart. He died from severe trauma and blood loss during helicopter transport to the trauma center, his final words expressing concern for his teammates' safety. His death led to enhanced marine wildlife monitoring protocols for all military diving operations and improved emergency response procedures for equipment failures in predator-rich waters. But while military training exercises carry inherent risks that can't be completely eliminated, sometimes the greatest dangers come from the most routine activities, like the recreational divers who venture into waters where apex predators patrol established territories. June 8, 2018 brought perfect diving conditions to Northern California's Mendocino coast. The morning fog had lifted early, revealing crystal clear water with visibility extending over 30 feet, conditions that would have been ideal for abalone diving in years past. For Carlos Mendoza, a 41-year-old experienced freediver with 15 years of diving experience, these conditions represented an opportunity to explore the underwater landscape he had known for decades, even though the red abalone fishery had been permanently closed 2 years earlier due to population collapse. Carlos was a respected member of the Northern California diving community. Known for his skill, safety record, and deep knowledge of the local marine environment, he had built a reputation as one of the most experienced freedivers on the coast. Since the abalone closure, he had transitioned to underwater photography and marine habitat documentation, using his diving skills to contribute to conservation efforts. His methodical approach to safety had kept him safe through countless dives in some of the most challenging challenging waters on the west coast. On this particular morning, Carlos was diving with his regular partner Mike Chen, conducting a photographic survey of former abalone habitat for a marine conservation group. They were following strict buddy protocols, with one diver down while the other maintained surface watch. The area they had chosen was a rocky reef system that had once supported abundant abalone populations, but was now showing signs of ecological change due to warming waters and sea star wasting disease. Carlos had been making routine dives to 25 feet, documenting the reef structure and remaining marine life. His technique was flawless: controlled descent, efficient photography work, and careful ascent to avoid shallow water blackout. Mike maintained constant visual contact from the surface, following their established safety protocols. What neither diver realized was that their chosen location had become part of an expanded great white shark hunting territory. The area's ecology had shifted dramatically in recent years. With abalone populations collapsed, the rocky reefs had been colonized by different species, and the local food web had reorganized. Harbor seals, no longer competing with abalone for kelp forest resources, had established new haul-out sites nearby. This change had attracted great white sharks to areas that had previously seen little predator activity. Recent studies would later show that great whites had expanded their hunting ranges as traditional prey distribution shifted due to climate change and ecosystem disruption. During his 7th dive of the morning, Carlos was photographing the barren reef structure at 20 feet when he noticed the water around him had become unusually still. The rockfish that had been abundant during his earlier dives had suddenly disappeared, and the usual sounds of the reef had gone quiet. These were subtle warning signs that Carlos, focused on his photography work, initially didn't recognize as significant. A 14-foot great white shark had been patrolling this newly established territory, adapting its hunting patterns to the changed ecosystem. The massive predator had been tracking Carlos's repetitive diving pattern for nearly 15 minutes, his silhouette breaking the surface repeatedly in an area now associated with seal activity. The shark's investigation was methodical. These apex predators often spend considerable time assessing unusual activities in their territory before deciding whether they represent a threat or opportunity. The encounter occurred as Carlos surfaced from his dive, floating calmly while preparing his camera for the next descent. Mike was positioned 30 yards away, maintaining visual contact according to their safety protocol. The great white approached from below with the stealth that makes these predators so effective. Carlos first noticed the shark as a dark shadow beneath him, but by then, the massive predator was already committed to its investigative approach. What happened next demonstrated the calculated nature of great white behavior. The shark didn't strike with the explosive force typical of seal predation. Instead, it approached Carlos with what marine biologists call investigative contact, a behavior where great whites use their mouths to assess unfamiliar objects. The massive jaws made contact with Carlos's torso, the shark's teeth penetrating his wetsuit as it attempted to determine what kind of creature it had encountered. The bite lasted only seconds, but the damage was severe. The great white's teeth, designed for cutting through blubber and bone, created deep puncture wounds in Carlos's chest and abdomen. The shark immediately released him and backed away, likely confused by Carlos's unfamiliar taste and texture. But the investigative bite had caused massive trauma, punctured lungs, damaged ribs, and severed blood vessels that began bleeding heavily into the surrounding water. Mike immediately responded to Carlos's distress calls, reaching him within 90 seconds and initiating emergency procedures. The great white had disappeared after the single contact, following typical investigative behavior, but Carlos was in critical condition. Mike managed to get him to their dive boat and immediately called for Coast Guard assistance while applying pressure to the wounds and monitoring Carlos's vital signs. The Coast Guard helicopter reached their location within 22 minutes, an excellent response time for the remote area. Carlos remained conscious during the initial rescue efforts, even helping to describe what had happened to the medical team. However, the great white's investigative bite had caused internal injuries that proved fatal. The massive predator's teeth had punctured vital organs and severed major blood vessels, creating internal bleeding that couldn't be controlled. Despite immediate trauma surgery at the regional medical center, Carlos died from internal bleeding and complications related to his injuries, his body unable to recover from the devastating damage inflicted by one of nature's most perfect predators. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.